This conference will now be recorded.
And so I chose the most fun thing to do. I contacted the local sailfish club, which is called Stewart Sailfish Club, and they have been creating an artificial reef out in the ocean of old tires, and nobody had studied it. So I used to get, my plan was to every morning wake up, find a dive buddy, and off we'd go using the school's dive equipment, their underwater cameras, and go out to one of these members of the club, and they would take us out to the ocean to the site, and we'd go down and dive and take pictures and count fish, and then we'd come up and fish and drink beer the rest of the day. I thought that was a great way to go through college.
Nice, nice. Nice. That's really nice. Hey, Jackson, can you just turn off the recording for a second, then I'll turn it back on?
This conference will now be recorded.
Hi, welcome to the Spacecom Entrepreneur Summit. The meeting will start in 3 minutes, and I just wanted to make a quick announcement and a thank you to our sponsors and our partners. The Italian Space Agency, Amazon Web Services, AFWorks, GenSpace, the ISS National Lab, Twilio, Lockheed Martin, Long Capture, HubSpot, and the Brazilian Space Agency. We welcome you for the rest of this workshop, which will start in 3 minutes. Also today's workshop, the main sponsor is the ISS National Lab.
It would have been nice if you had like a little video of them waving at us or something from the ISS station.
Well, that's probably a good idea, Steve. Maybe we'll do some video promotions next time for this.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Having a waving video from the ISS is super cool.
All right, we have to make some phone calls here. Steve, can you get on it and see if we can do a patch?
I'm seeing if I could do that right now. Let's see here.
Welcome all. Please have a seat, stand up. I've had a standing desk here at my home office since March of last year, so I've been standing on all my calls. So if you see me pacing around, it's because I'm on 3 cushions on a hard floor. But grab a seat, grab a table, grab a cup of coffee, tea, water. We want to make this very family style in terms of an approach to a workshop. I'm really bummed out that we're not doing this live in person, but for safety considerations due to the pandemic, we're doing this remotely, which in some ways has the benefit that much more people can join across all different time zones. Jackson, I don't see the chat feature. Is it not enabled on this?
I see it.
How do I get to it? Is it a, oh, there it is, okay.
The balloon
Yeah,
thing.
the balloon thing, okay, yeah.
Good morning, Stephen. This is Brian Barnett. How are you?
Excellent. How are you, Brian?
Good.
Where are you calling in from or videoing or zooming
From
in?
New Mexico.
New Mexico. Great.
Hey, I was going to ask you, I don't know if I missed yesterday, but I'm really interested in seeing like exactly like the schedule or what we need to know in terms of the competition, like
Sure.
like actions that we all need to have or preparation by which day, you know, like
Sure.
I see we need like a 1-minute video and so forth, but I'm just trying to figure out when we quote unquote give our presentation or that sort of thing. Thank you.
Yep. Good question, and I'll make sure to cover that.
Hi, good morning, Stefan. This is Zubi from Austin, Texas. How are you doing?
Good, great. Hey, Zubi, great. Glad to have you join us. How are you today?
Thank you so much. I am well. Thank you so much, sir.
Great.
Somebody asked a question yesterday about the low funding attributed to space health. And I don't know how to follow up with that person because I think they also had experience with iTech. Is there a way for participants to be able to communicate with each other?
Oh, absolutely. Feel free. I mean, you if you want, put your request in the chat, type it in, and I'm trying to remember who that might have asked that question. Jackson, in the recordings, are we recording the chats as well?
Yeah, I think that was me talking about astronaut health and biofilm in space. Can you hear me?
Oh, wait. Oh, is that Marilyn Bruno?
That is.
Oh, okay. Wow. Well, thanks for answering. I had no idea. Okay. How
Yeah,
can I communicate with you later on?
shoot me an email.
Zuby, do you have Marilyn's email address? I can try to facilitate
No,
that.
sir.
Okay, I'll connect both of you on that.
Okay. Thanks so much, Stefan. Thanks so much, Marilyn.
Thank you so much for your interest.
Great. Well, why don't we? It's now on my clock here, 8:03. Why don't we kick this off? Welcome everyone. I appreciate you taking the time, and hopefully you found yesterday to be informative. We had an amazing line of speakers speaking about NASA, AFWERX, Italian Space Agency, ESA, and hopefully you got an idea of opportunities there. You have now the access to reach out to those folks. I'll be sending out the complete slide deck for all the workshops by the weekend, this weekend, as I collate all the information from all the speakers. So want to really reinforce that we're going to make this a collaborative, communicative workshop. Again, we're emulating the opportunity for us to be all in the same place virtually. I wish we were all in the same room so we could have side conversations and all that, and I welcome that as well. We can, if you guys need it, we can have breaks in between, or we can stay on a little bit later until after the sessions adjourn, so you can communicate with each other. And as you just heard, if you have a particular person you want to reach out to, either put information on the chat, make yourself visible in terms of your email, or just ask me. I can make those connections. So I do recommend, because this is a cohort style approach to taking a workshop, that you all reach out to each other, access each other. I use LinkedIn a lot, so LinkedIn, feel free to link in with me, and then also with each other as people see interest. And I see Marilyn just put her email address in as well. So why don't we go through and just quickly, Jackson, on the next slide. Again, just to reinforce and to thank today's workshop sponsor, the ISS National Lab. Due to them, we're able to provide this workshop for you. On the next slide, I've collated, I hope, all the flags of all the countries that are being represented today. So I counted 21 companies, 21 countries worth the representation of companies. And again, the flags are in no particular order, and I apologize for maybe the sizing. I tried to fit 21 flags on one slide. But the exciting thing is this year SES has grown to 69 companies and 108 entrepreneurs. So this is the 4th iteration of SES and the workshop series, and it's pretty exciting to be part of that growth. And we have an amazing group of volunteer judges. So on the next slide, we talk about, Jackson, there you go. What I recommend is find a quiet location, but if you want, turn on your cameras. But the idea is, if your camera's on and your microphone's on and it senses any movement, it starts to record you in the final recording, which I saw yesterday. So please make sure you're on mute unless you want to be on camera on the recording. So if you do have a question, please unmute and find a proper time to ask, just like as if raising your hand. Jump up and down or put something in the chat. There's an option here in GoToMeeting to use the view who's talking It's in the top center. You can choose either view everyone, view who's talking, all different options. I recommend you do that. This webinar will be recorded and provided. As you saw yesterday from Steve, by the end of today, you'll have a link to the recording. As I mentioned, the slides, and we're also coming up with a cool feedback form that's going to give you the ability to give feedback on each and every day in terms of the content. So please, when you do receive that form, we appreciate the feedback. So on today's agenda, I'm going to go through a brief 15-minute presentation on the importance of sales. And then we have Jose Martins from HubSpot that's going to talk about how to build revenue growth using the CRM system. Sean Casey is going to be presenting on the Lean Business Model Canvas. Basically, a really important part and something I strongly recommend that everyone in the competition do an analysis, a Lean Business Model Canvas analysis of their business. It helps in the judging process, and we'll talk about that as well today. And then at noon Eastern time, we'll have Andy Aldrin from Florida Institute of Technology join us, talking about value propositions, and specifically in the space market. Then afterwards, if the speakers can stay on, we'll have an interactive discussion with them. If not, we'll make sure that we answer and address as many of your questions as possible, and then do a preview for tomorrow. Before we end today, I'm also going to go through talking about what to expect for next week in terms of Mentor Week, and just an overview and an overall perspective of the pitch competition. So again, hopefully you all know me. Again, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm the executive director of Gen Space, as well as the co-founder of Angelus Funding. At Gen Space, just a brief quick overview, what we're doing is we're pulling together a global platform that enables anyone that wants to do business in space, someplace to go, someplace to connect. We are trying to pull together all the ecosystems for space entrepreneurship, whether it's accelerators, incubators, space agencies, local economic development organizations, and try to make it as easy as possible to do business in space in a very collaborative way. And at Angelus Funding, we're a global network of trust-based angels, and we look at opportunities. So we've invested in a couple of space companies as well, and I'm pretty excited about that. So basically, in terms of sales, the viability of a company is really built through sales. Ultimately, to make a company or to make a business functional, you have the need for sales. You have a product that you pull together, and you have some ability to get that product known to the market, also known as marketing, and then figure out how to generate revenue from that product, namely how to generate sales from that product. So to do that, if we go left to right on this slide, what you want to do is figure out who your customers are. So discover who your customers are, and then put together a product. In the software term and traditional entrepreneurial terms, that's known as a minimal viable product. And then you want to validate your customers, give the ability for your customers to use that product, and also develop what's called a repeatable sales process. So ideally, depending on what your business model is, you're not going to just have one customer. You're going to have the requirement to have multiple customers. So you want to put together a process to sell your product to multiple customers. So figure out what does that cycle look like? What are the questions you ask? How do you actually perform that operation? And then once you've developed this customer base, you want to figure out how to repeatably and also rapidly scale the growth of your company. Now, in the space business, you can still argue that you still have those concerns, but the importance here in sales is that you need salespeople to bridge that gap between what the customer needs and what your product does, right? So again, the company grows revenue based on sales, revenue generation, and the sales teams also have to work on making your customers happy and retaining them. It's really no good to promote your product, sell to the world, and have you lose all your customers. Again, if anyone has any questions, I think one of the things I did wrong yesterday was I didn't pause enough. So feel free, turn on your cameras, turn on your mics, ask a question as we're going through this, just as if we're in the same room. So I welcome questions as we're going through, and I'll keep an eye out on the chat as well. So if we looked at the traits on the next slide, talking about what successful salespeople would need, and this is important for the founders on this call, or maybe there's salespeople on this call. When you're looking to grow your company, you want to either acquire, hire, or partner with, or have a co-founder that can do this. From my experience, I've pulled together this list of 7 successful traits that salespeople should need. Kind of similar to the presentation from yesterday in terms of entrepreneurs, but you want to find salespeople that are ambitious. So folks that are going to take the opportunity to make their own decisions, to really focus on what they can do. Just self-motivation is important, so they're ambitious to do it. Courage is important. It's a confidence issue in terms of if you're not confident and you're trying to sell something, it comes across, and that gives doubt to the prospect, the person listening to what you're selling. Whether it's the product, is it you? So you have to be courageous in your approach. You have to take the ability of figuring out how to harness all your energy and promote that product that you're selling. You want to be committed to the sales process. Sales requires commitment. It gives it gets long. The process could be long, the process can be short, but you want to be committed. Once you start selling something, you want to fulfill whatever that cycle is and drive through the goal of either finding out if you can sell to that prospect or moving on to the next one, right? There's always this getting to know or getting to yes perspective in sales, but you want to be committed through whatever process you take. And ideally, yes is a great word, but no is not a bad word either, because if someone says no to you, all you have to do is ask why. And if they take the time to explain why they're not interested, you can maybe figure out, did you not explain something? Did you just totally approach the wrong person? Professionalism is super important. There's a balance of friendliness and professionalism, or kind of chumminess. You want to come across super professional, super responsive, and respectful. Preparedness, you always want to be prepared for whatever might happen. There's always something's going to happen in terms of whether it's a technical glitch in terms of presenting slides, or an email thing doesn't work, or your computer crashes, but just be prepared. Have all these ways to address certain situations or scenarios so that you can still get your message across or make the connection happen. And be honest, right? So I guess honesty is just an inherent trait here. You want to be honest. And again, I moved from a technical career into sales. I did sales for 20, 30 years of my life. And initially, when you hear the word salesperson, you think probably all the bad experiences you ever had. But those are bad salespeople, or bad experiences with salespeople. Sales enables you to get whatever you usually enjoy. So as a salesperson, it's important to be either a combination of curious and also a continual learner. So it always interests, especially in a technical sale, if you as the salesperson are interested in what that prospect or customer is doing, and figure out in a very consultative way. Asking questions is a good thing, right? And then responsibility. So salespeople should have a very tight responsibility to the companies in terms of what they're doing, why they're doing it, and they're responsible and accountable for the sales process, right? So in terms of sales skills, those are the traits. I think strongly that salespeople should have excellent organization, managing their time, managing their territory, or the responsibility of opportunities. Salespeople should be listening more than talking. You all have heard that we've been given 2 ears, 1 mouth, so you should be listening twice as much as you're speaking, right? So the ability for you to listen, because you have to listen with intention. You want to very carefully understand if there's particular objections or things that you should be able to work around. Again, it's that being prepared for whatever they might say. Jose mentioned in the chat, patience, resilience, and urgency in appropriate manner, right? So it might be that as a salesperson, you want to close this or you want to get this sale. Well, that's your urgency. You want to make sure that everyone feels that same sense of urgency. So drive the urgency from the customers or prospects perspective. Confidence goes back with that courage. You absolutely, especially in the technical arena that we're all in, you have to be the product expert. You have to be aware of the product, what you're doing with the product. And if you need to, it's okay to pull in someone else from your company, but the salespeople should be able to explain as much as possible of what that product does. And then I put efficient worker. So you want to be able to address, all that organization that you have efficiently. So the time you spend as a salesperson, you have to be as efficient as possible. So if we come to the process that I mentioned, this is a very simple example of what a sales process would look like. Telling prospects, right? So that the idea here is a prospect is a potential customer, about the benefits of your offering, and you'll learn more about this from the speakers today. Ask them, you want to make sure that as you're telling this, it makes sense to them. So I have to ask them or get the validation that this resonates with them. And if not, ask them what would, right? So it's that interview process, right? So you're presenting something, but you want to make sure that they're hearing what you're saying. So listen for whatever feedback. And it could be one of the challenges with what's going on nowadays with the pandemic is things are virtual. It's really hard to get feedback. I'm seeing just from this SES, from last year's SES to this one, because I can't see you all, I can't tell, if the feedback is there. I'm watching the chats. So just listen carefully and watch. So it's not just what they say, but ideally the body language, how they act. So ideally, the prospect will tell you their needs. It's there, right? You should be able to understand it. And they might even, if you find the right clues, they might even tell you how to sell them, right? So there's all these different techniques. And if anyone's interested, I'd be happy to point people in different really good areas on sales techniques and sales architecture. So here is a little bit more in-depth terminology of the sales process. So it's the prospecting, the qualifying, moving to the learning as much as possible about the customer, the approach people with a relationship in mind, right? So again, it's that professionalism that's required, but you want to approach them to establish the relationship. Just like with the fact that you're all in this SES cohort, that's your relationship, and leverage it. You can say, I know that you've been in this cohort. You can then move forward and say, well, because we all went through this together, or find something. I like the fact that LinkedIn can tell me at least where people are coming from, maybe where they grew up, where they went to high school, where they worked. So build that relationship when you approach someone. Get to know them before you even say the first word. Then you want to go through the product presentation and demonstration, ideally, and we'll tell you more about that through the speakers today, talking about the story and focus on the benefits, your value proposition, and then handling the customer objections, if there are any, closing, meaning asking for the order, and then following up. The important thing is you want to follow up, make sure your customer is satisfied, and you get repeat business from this. There's a question here about setting up a LinkedIn group for us to join, and I'll bring that up, and that's probably a really great idea as well. Let me just grab a note on that. Okay, great. So in terms of one of the pieces is the sales proposal, and just an overall, for those of you who have done this is a repeat, but basically in a sales proposal, you want to put together a summary, a description of the company description, the description of your product, list of the benefits, and then things that would ideally set you apart from the competition, and then the conclusion. So on the next slide, we talk about competition. So it's okay to have competitors. Now, my comment yesterday about space and not having all working together, and even Frank said if you want to get milk, you don't design a cow, you go buy it from a cow kind of thing. So there's an idea of partnerships, but there's also the opportunity to understand that if you do have competitors, first of all, they're validating that there's a market that exists, especially if they're doing well. But you have to understand what's called the SWOT analysis. Understand your strengths, your weakness, what the opportunity is, and then what potential threats are from other people. So it's important to know what your competitor offers. And if it is competitive, two things. You must be better, more persuasive, and more customer focused, in my opinion, and you should offer more solutions than your competitor, or better solutions. So the next slide, and this is something you can do for yourself, put together a list of your strengths, a list of your weaknesses, a list of the opportunities and the threats that your competitors will have. So if you look at the left side, it's internally focused, the right side is externally focused. So from a sales meeting perspective, again, what you're going to do is you're going to meet with the decision makers. You'll talk about your competitive advantages, your unique secret sauce. You'll have them align with you to have them realize that you have value. So get them to perceive the value, get the desire for your proposal, get them to ask you for the proposal, and then in your proposal, really prove that you're the best solution, and then close and get to the next steps. So next slide goes through very quickly things to do, and I'll just run through this real quick. Make sure you earn respect. Don't feel that you're entitled to get the respect. Make sure there's enough time for the process. It's okay to ask hard questions, hard, respectful questions, but it's really important to listen. Use short elevator pitches, and I think we'll cover that today, but basically use short ways of explaining what you're doing in a quick manner. Customize your presentations from opportunity to opportunity if you need to. Always exceed people's expectations. Tell them you'll get back to them in 2 days and then get back to them in a day, kind of thing. They'll be happy, right? So don't blow out your expectations. Don't set expectations and miss them. Use your network for warm introductions. Again, this is a friendly family style approach, so we're all relatively warmly introduced here. Use effective meetings with agendas and make sure there's content that's appropriate, and make sure you follow up. Last slide for my part is don't try to sell. I don't think there's really a trying in selling. So if you're not comfortable in the sales process, realize that you probably need to partner with a co-founder or hire someone that's in sales. If you try to sell, you could really lose opportunities. Don't waste people's times, right? So again, you either find an opportunity to speak to someone and ask them if this is the right time, but don't waste their time, because that's going to be something that people are going to never forget. Don't be late. Don't forget steps in the process. Don't keep on talking and talking and then talking, right? Again, listening is part of this. Be careful about selling futures, right? If you don't sell what you have today, people are going to buy your future product and not buy what you have today. Don't overcommit. Don't assume a friendship, earn the friendship. So, but again, approach it in a warm perspective, approach it in a professional perspective. Don't assume that you're instantly friends, and don't ever leave loose ends. Don't ever make a commitment and not follow up on it. It's just not a good way to go.
I'm sorry.
Yep. You have a question?
Yeah, that previous slide, I'm not sure if you contradicted what it said or if I read it wrong.
Which one?
What I understood was you said don't sell the future, and there it says only sell future features, or did I misread that?
Oh, sorry, don't. So it's I should have made it. This is all. Can you go back one slide? So it's don't try to sell, don't waste people's times, don't sell only future features. There's a word that's don't in front of all these.
Okay, yeah, no, of course. Then I'm sorry. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're right. I'm just completely misreading the slide. My mistake.
No,
Apologies.
good question. Yeah. That's funny to say if I was telling people sell only futures, but don't. No, these are all the don'ts, and then the previous slide is all the do's.
Yeah, no, exactly. You're right. I was just reading on. My apologies.
No problem, no problem. Any quick questions? And did I strike up good thoughts in people's heads, or any feedback on at least my perspective, my portion of this?
Based on the lecture from last night, when we think of sales, at least at this point in time, we're thinking of one of those companies that presented yesterday, and they're really not, they're sales, but they're actually programs that are available. Is there a difference between sales and programs?
Well, you're still selling to those programs, right? You're still following a process. You're either submitting an RFQ, RFP, you know, whatever the RFI, whatever their terminology is, you're following something. So you're presenting yourself in the best light. You want to understand what the process is, and yeah, you should follow up. You should find out what the timeline is. It's still selling. Do you see that parallel? I mean, you're selling your company.
Yes.
Yeah, you're finding out how do they make their decision, and you need a way to track your engagement. Any other questions?
Hi, yes, and this is Zubi. I have quite a number of questions, and I know we're very short on time. A lot of the tips you were given on the sales, you know, we touched on some of like customer discovery elements, market research elements, and to keep this question short, do you have a resource where somebody can find out more on practice, especially somebody coming from a technical background that, you know, everything here is sort of new when you're talking about sales process?
Yeah, we'll look for a resource, and I'm sure the remaining speakers we'll touch up on that too. So I'll make sure that if they don't cover it, we can talk about that in the discussion part.
Thanks so much, Stefan.
Sure. Anyone else?
Stefan, hi, this is Eric Long. I have a quick question for you in regard to the supporting material for the sales process. For instance, I hope other people can relate to this as well. If you have a product that's almost ready for market or in the process of being released to the marketplace, and you're speaking with different prospects or people that may be interested in purchasing your product, and there's going to be elements of maybe testing involved with the particular product or even legal concerns. At what stage in the sales process should you have supporting documentation or information and provide that to the potential customer? Is there a standard way of doing that people usually expect in the space industry?
I think it's really you're gonna explain what you're gonna do, and then you can only prove what you have, right? So right. I think you should err on be cautious of just sending out your business plan, because that opens up a lot of areas of potential concern. You want to figure out realistically, because again, that's selling the future, right? So if you have an idea, and maybe ask particularly maybe Sean today in terms of how he would address this. But in the space business, you want to be able to really defend whatever your readiness level is. So, and that's going to be the documentation that's required.
So if you were to have, say, like for instance, we have a product, our D3, which is at a TRL rating of between 7 and 8, I'd say. And so if right now we're in the process of engaging in testing for the D3 unit. So the idea being that we'd have the test documentation prior to actually soliciting customers. So I mean, at that point, I mean, it's certainly going to come up at some point in time, but I'm just wondering if that's something you would even bring up initially, or is that something you want to already have in place before you're even selling the product, so that when the subject comes up, you can show the potential customer. You know, that's kind of what I'm trying to get a feel for.
Yeah. Let's see if that question is not answered, like in the later half of the next hour.
Okay, so, thank you.
Sure. Why don't we jump in? We'll hold the questions off for my part. Jose, it's my pleasure to introduce Jose. Jose is responsible for partnerships for HubSpots for Startups North America. And Jose, do you have slides that you're going to present?
I do.
Okay. Let's give Jackson, if you can give Jose. There you go. Perfect. And let me just make sure I'll address the questions that weren't answered and afterwards as well.
I think it looks like I need to restart, so give me one quick second.
Oh, sure. Great. Steve, are you still on? Steve Wolf?
Yes, Stefan.
Hey, there's a question that came up. Could we set up, does Spacecom have a LinkedIn group?
Yes, I believe it is. I believe it does.
Okay, because Bernard was asking if we can set up.
I'll find it and paste it in there.
Okay, that'd be cool. Or if it's possible to stand up, could we set up a Spacecom SES LinkedIn group? Something to think about. Let's see here.
So let's see. Let me know if you can see an orange slide.
Yes, you're on.
Yeah?
The floor is yours, Jose.
So, and by the way, thank you, Stefan, for inviting me. As you were talking through your presentation, I was so excited. I wish I had you when I started a company 10 years ago, and I thought, oh, I just need to build it, right? And they will come. And I learned the worst way possible, which is you have to close your company, that you actually need to sell and you need customers if you want to keep going. So that's how I started in sales, and I'm very passionate about sales, especially if you're a startup, if you're early on. And I'm going to try to stay on topic because we don't have a ton of time, and just talk about CRM and how you use it in the early stages of your business. But if you want to talk sales later on, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I love to talk about these things. So I'm going to get started, as Stefan mentioned before. And by the way, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Brilliant. So as Stefan mentioned, I work at HubSpot, which is a software company here in Boston, and I work with the startups team. So we help startups actually use this software. So if you want to learn more, just go there. I'm not going to spend time there. What I want to talk about is CRM. It's almost like a taboo subject when you're so early on. And the way I think about it, if I'm a early stage founder, is I'm thinking about, process versus velocity, right? Like right now, I need to go fast. I'm starting out. I can't invest a ton of time in creating infrastructure and creating process because that's going to slow me down. And I get that, right? Like that's very true. That's very accurate. So when you think about this concept in terms of tools, you think, well, like Google Sheets, I can probably get a lot of stuff done using Google Sheets versus complicating my life with a CRM. And that is also true when you're very early on. Now, I found there are two mistakes most founders make. One is, and you'll know this because many of you are in the technical aspect of business, is when you hack a solution for now that is rapid, that has velocity, what you end up is, if you don't pay attention, you build up tech debt. And that happens the same for your marketing and your sales tools. And so the two mistakes are the following. The first mistake is founders don't realize how early you can start building that tech debt. Very early on that you need to move from Google Sheets because they actually slow you down as you try to get more customers. So in my experience, as soon as you get to that product market fit and you're starting to get in more than the first couple of customers, you probably should start thinking about implementing a CRM. Second mistake founders make is they realize they built tech debt and they overcorrect and they go to a very complex legacy CRM system that major corporations use because they feel like, well, like if these companies are so big, use this CRM, I need to use that same CRM to look professional. And that is a second mistake. These companies have hundreds of thousands of dollars to invest in a sales operations team, in an implementation consultant that helps them build very robust, but also very technically complex systems. And that is a second mistake they make. They overcorrected this very corporate-y legacy CRM system. Now, this was very excusable 5 years ago. 5 years ago, you had legacy CRMs, or you had CRMs that were either very easy to use, they will create tech debt pretty quickly, or you had what I call legacy CRMs, which are the more complex ones, but they were very difficult to implement. So it was really hard to make that choice. Now, the new generation of CRMs in the last 5 years, they're both easy to use and powerful. So you can go from the initial founding team all the way to almost IPO if you want, using the same CRM. So that excuse is no longer valid. Now, what I hope to do with the next few slides is show you a little bit of, if you're navigating the decision of moving to a CRM, if you haven't already, what should you look for in those very early stage CRM systems for your startup? So there are three aspects that I want to highlight when you're looking for a system that allows you to execute what Stefan was talking about, like that sales process, the prospecting, generating connections, generating leads, and then generating sales. So there are three aspects that your CRM should help you do, especially at this stage. One is, should allow you to capture all the interactions that you have with prospects, with customers, with mentors and investors all in one place. You don't want to have the burden of having to do all that manually. You want that to happen automatically. The second thing is, and this is what a lot of people miss for CRMs, they think of this only as like a sales tool to manage your deal pipeline. It's not, right? A CRM should help you grow your database of people you can connect with and learn more about them, even before you connect with them. So we're going to talk about which tools help you do this, help you grow that database. The third thing is, you should have a tool that helps you actually connect with prospects and create a deal, move a deal through a pipeline, make sure you're paying attention in the right places so that you can actually convert customers. And so this looks a lot like what Stefan was talking about in terms of a sales process. So again, you know this already, right? The life of an entrepreneur is a ride. You're going to meet a ton of people, and it's going to become overwhelming really quick. So how do you get back on track? You use a CRM, right? The CRM makes it easier. It doesn't create process that slows down your company. It actually enables your team to be more productive. So how do you do this? First of all, there are many CRMs out there that you can start for free. Now, I'm from HubSpot, so what I'm going to show you is a lot of screenshots from HubSpot. I'm not trying to sell HubSpot. If you find another one that you like, use another one. I'm just explaining the concept through the tool that I know. So first of all, create a CRM. If you want to try HubSpot, here's how you do it. You create an account on our startups page, and you just have a free CRM. Now, first thing you do when you have your CRM, upload all your data that you have on your Google Sheets or your Excel spreadsheet. Upload it to the system. It should be easy to use. If it is not easy to do, probably not a good CRM to use. Second thing is, you want to connect your email. Like, most of your interactions are going to happen through email. And this is interactions with prospects, with customers, potential customers, investors, mentors. All of these happen through email. So you want your email to be connected to your CRM. So every time you send an email, every time you receive an email, it is automatically logged on your CRM. And then you want to have your tools from your CRM showing on your Gmail. Because what really slows you down is having to jump between your email, where you spend most of your day, and your CRM, which is not your natural place to be in during the day. So you want to be able to execute as much as you can from your Gmail. So again, look for a CRM that can connect your email to your CRM tools. Now, that's how you just capture data that is happening right now. So you don't lose it and you don't waste time registering it anywhere. Second thing is, this is really important. This is where most people miss the concept of a CRM. They only think about, oh, deal pipelines. No, a CRM can help you actually grow your database. So how does it help you? There are a few tools that I know from the HubSpot tool that can help you. One is identifying who's looking at you, right? Like, you connect your website, if you have one, you connect your website to your CRM, and what it does is it's almost like the missed call, and it shows you what's the number that called. The same thing with IPs, right? It will go back and look, well, who was on your website? Even if they didn't tell you who they were, even if they didn't call you and tell you, hey, I was on your website, or leave any information on your contact form, just because of their IP, you might be able to identify who's looking at you. So you may be seeing that 15 people from Department of Defense have been on your website, 50 times. So maybe someone from SpaceX has been on your website. Having this information is very valuable for you to kind of know where to invest your time when you're trying to connect with potential customers. If a lot of people from SpaceX are looking at your website, if I only have time to call one person today, I'm going to make sure I call people at SpaceX because I know they're looking at me right now. So this ability to identify who's looking at you, very powerful. Now, most decent CRMs today will allow you to actually enrich your information about people visiting you automatically without you having to go and research a ton about the company. There's a ton of available information on the web that your system should be able to scrape off the internet. The next thing is, if people are looking at you, if you have that person from SpaceX or the DoD on your website, and if by any chance they're ready to connect with you or they want to ask you questions, you want to make it easy for them. So the next thing your CRM should do is it should allow you to build a bot for people to chat with you or to leave information. So chatbots and chats should be something that you should definitely have on your website so that you start converting more people. Like a chatbot could allow you, give you the possibility to 24/7 ask people what they're looking for, what's their email, and what's the best time to call them back. Even if you're asleep, even if you're, busy building something technical on your company, or you're meeting with investors and you're not there to answer to prospects right there, right then, or even for investors, you want a mechanism to capture their information, log it into your database, and then reach back to them later on. Again, pop-up forms, another way of converting people. Hey, you want to learn more about us? I know a startup that is using this for investing, so for raising funds. So they have a page for investors, and they have a downloadable with their pitch deck. What that does is someone is looking at your company, you're not there to answer, but it's a potential investor. They can download information about you, but also you get to know who is it that is looking at you from a fundraising point of view. So that is very powerful as well. So pop-up forms, also something that you should have on your website. By the way, everything that I'm mentioning today, at least in the HubSpot platform, is free. So it's not like you have to pay a single dollar for it. You just have to go and do it. And again, as I mentioned before, when you're doing these conversion mechanisms, you want to make sure you're asking the right information about the people so that you can have enough context to reach back to them and be effective when you're trying to prospect. Now, third is monetize. This is probably what you mostly think about when you think of a traditional CRM. This is the sales side of things, which is I have a prospect or I have a target. Now I'm going to connect with that target. I'm going to try to get them on the phone or on a meeting or on a Zoom, and then I'm going to create an opportunity, and eventually they'll buy from me. So that's the typical sales process, as Stefan was mentioning before. Now, how do you do that, right? The way I see it is you start with what is the process you want to implement to have a consistent way of outreach to your market or to your potential customers, and then have a system that allows you to execute on that process. So for me, because I work in SaaS, for me, it's a high level of activity prospecting. So we need to be contacting 10 to 15 leads per week, sometimes 50. So, and I need to do that more than once, right? Most reps make the big mistake of only reaching out to a prospect once. They never reach out twice. There's actually stats that say only 30% of reps reach out to a prospect more than once. But those who do have a 75% probability of actually creating a deal. So it's a huge advantage if you can have a system that allows you to reach out to prospects multiple times. Now, my case, my sequence is 4 attempts of connecting every 2 days. And what I do is I create the process and then I build it on a tool that allows me to execute that process automatically. And I have my email templates already set up, so I don't have to invest a ton of money for each individual outreach. So I can do this process of outreach for 50 people in a week or even in a day if I just reserve the right amount of time. So again, the system is not slowing me down, it's actually making me more productive. And then I can actually check, is my process of outreach actually being effective? Is that first email actually resonating? Is it being open? Are people responding to it? So I can adjust and say, well, I need to change either the email or change the frequency of my outreach or change the length of number of attempts of outreach that I do. So I'm starting to generate data, not only for me, but I'm generating data for my investors, because now I can go in and if I'm raising a seed round or if I'm raising a Series A, I can say, I know how to create pipeline for my business. This is my process of connecting. I connect 6 times every 3 days, 3 emails, 3 phone calls, and it has a 75% hit rate. So I know, and then I know my cost of acquisition of customers and deals. So again, you're building a process with these tools. Now, then how do you actually build and track a pipeline? Similar to what Stefan mentioned in the past, in the previous slides, which is all these steps in your sales process. How do you keep track of it when you have just more than one people you're talking to at a time? So again, eventually you'll have a bunch of people here. Hopefully that's good news, but it also becomes overwhelming if it's customers, if it's prospects, mentors, or investors. How do you keep track of this is with trying to filter what's important, right? So for me, for example, one thing that is important is if I have a deal that I've been working on and I haven't reached out to, I haven't had any sales activity on a deal for a week, that needs my attention. That's falling through the cracks and that's going to cool down. So I want to keep that urgency going and I want to keep the momentum of that deal going. So I don't want to have these deals fall through the cracks. I create a view that highlights which are the deals I have had more than X amount of days where I haven't done any activity on them. Now, eventually, and this is later on, when you have enough volume of sales activity, you may want a system, and this is when you get into the paid version of tools, you may want a system where you can build automation behind these processes. So you want these processes not to be run by you, but actually be run by the CRM automatically. So that generates a lot of free time for you to focus on the right things. And this is what it looks like, is automation on the sales process. Again, this is probably something for when you're close to that Series A, you probably have 1 or 2 reps that are working multiple deals a week. This is where you may want to have that automation in your system. So again, as a setup for, or as a summary of the monetizing with a CRM, you want to optimize and create a process for outreach so you can learn what is more effective in creating new pipeline for your business. And then you also want to create a system where everybody knows what are the steps that need to go through. Like I think Stefan mentioned, we don't want sales reps that are skipping steps, that are doing proper qualification, that are not wasting anyone's time. You do this by personalizing your pipeline and working the deals that require the most attention. So I know this is a ton of information to go through. Hopefully this is a good entry to understanding a little bit more about CRMs. Again, I know it's a ton of information. If you want to know more, just reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm always available. And I hope this was helpful.
Any questions? We have a couple minutes for questions, Jose, if anyone wants to ask.
Excellent.
Any questions for Jose? Now, Jose, do you want to mention a little bit about the offer that people have because they've signed up for this workshop?
Absolutely. So for the pitch competition, the members or those who participate in the pitch competition and SES actually get access to HubSpot. So I spoke a lot today about getting started with a CRM, and 90% of what I showed you, except for the automation, were the free tools. But when you're ready to move into paid tools, either for the sales side or the marketing side, HubSpot and SES partner up, so you get access to these tools at 90% discount. So it's a very steep discount if you feel your startup is ready to invest in more advanced marketing and sales tools. HubSpot and SES partner up so you can get access to enterprise level tools at 90% discount. So instead of paying, $1,000 a month, you're paying $100 a month for very robust tools.
Great. Well, and please, we'll figure out the process. If you're interested in that opportunity to work with HubSpot and you're in the competition, email me and I'll make sure that we get you the proper sign up with Jose. So thank you, Jose.
I have a question, guys. If we still can fit it in.
Yeah, sure.
Jose, thanks for the presentation. I'm working with CRM already for more than a year. I can tell a couple of years, and still the most problematic task is to identify all the parameters of each deal stage in the pipeline, so that I know exactly and I'm sure that the deal should go from one step to another step. And so this is the real, I think this is one of the most difficult things to do. How you solve that? Probably there should be like 1 or 2 hours to explain, to go through all of that, but I know that in HubSpot there are also lots of resources. If you can share something with us with examples, because it was really a difficult thing for me to identify these parameters so that I can control me, I can control my co-founder, my salesperson, so that the deal is exactly in this stage in the pipeline, and both of us on the same page. We know what should that mean.
It's a great question, and I may be able to share an article that I really like from my favorite sales blog is named Inflection Point, and it's a lot about B2B enterprise sales. And Bob Apollo, who's the writer, has this resource where it maps out your sales process with your buyer's process. You can't build a sales process without understanding how the people who buy from you, your ideal buyer, goes through that decision process. So you start there. How do they go through that decision process? And then you basically create a mirror on the sales side to make sure you're helping them move through those stages. So that's the first step. What are your sales stages steps that mimic how people buy? That's one. Second is, how do you know people move from, let's say you have a sales pipeline process of 5 steps. How do you know, and how do you have consistency in your team internally to know that a deal is moving from step 1 to step 2? That's where most of the problems happen. Maybe this is what you're referring to. So what you build is something we call exit criteria. And exit criteria is, for example, if you're looking at this process right here, from connect to explore. In our team, we had 3 things for exit criteria. We needed to have someone's WhatsApp number, and this we were selling into LATAM. We needed to have WhatsApp number. We had to have a good understanding of the problem to solve. And we had to have someone who had a decision-making process power. If we didn't have that, for us, that meant that that deal needed to stay on that stage of the sales process a little longer. So we wouldn't move that to a presentation stage until we had those. So what you need to converse with your co-founder and the rest of the team is agree on what is the criteria, what is the information you need from the prospect and about the situation before you move to the next stage in the process, and everybody has to agree on that. Now, a CRM could technically help you keep consistency, where you could have something where when you move a deal from step 1 to step 2, it pops up and gives you, hey, you need to answer these questions before you're able to move this deal from step 1 to step 2. That's the technical side. But the process side is you need to agree on what is the exit criteria. What we find moves a deal from step 1 to step 2. Hopefully that helps a little.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Jose. one session. Thank you. Thanks for presenting, Jose, and you'll make the slides available to me. And we'll send them to the group. So between Sean and Andrew, do you guys have any time constraints? If can we just keep on the flow, or do I need to swap spots between you guys?
Yes, so I told you I've got a teaching gig, but it's not for about 3 hours, so I'm good for at least another hour.
Oh, perfect. No, great. So we'll just keep on the schedule then and let Sean go.
Yeah, let's let Sean go first.
Sean, the floor is yours, and feel free. Sean Casey, I'm excited to have him speak about the Lean Business Model Canvas. And again, I strongly urge that you all do this as part of the competition, but just also for yourselves.
Well, let's see, Stefan, thank you very much. I'd like to thank the organizers, Stephen Wolf and Stefan Recke for asking me to participate today. And I invite anybody to connect with me on LinkedIn. There you'll see my LinkedIn picture. Of course, I'm kind of doing the old man in the sea routine today, but I think I need to share my screen here, Stefan, if that's possible. Here we go. All right. Let me do that. Let me get back onto where we are. Here we go. So again, didn't want it. Always the best laid schemes of mice and men. Gonna have to gly and leave us not for grief and pain for promised joy. But here we go. Please connect with me on LinkedIn, and happy to talk about the business model generation. And this is actually from a book by Alex Osterwalder, and has actually been fairly popular within the NSF ICOR program. It's sort of popularized by Steve Blank, and it's just a good way of thinking about your business. I don't know how familiar everybody is with the material that's covered here, and what I'd like to do is just highlight some aspects of what's discussed in business model generation, which is talking about customers, talking about front office activities, which is interacting with customers, back office activities, like we just had the discussion from HubSpot about customer relationship managers and other things. But let me just jump right in here. This is the business model canvas that many people talk about, and it's helpful in thinking about whatever your business might be. So if you're a nonprofit, it works. If you're just a regular, lifestyle business, it works. If you're a company that's looking for venture capital and you want to grow, it's also very helpful. So I've worked with I've worked with a number of startups on this, also university groups too. So it's a very helpful way to structure the relationship between you and your partner, between you, your customers, and your partners. So the structure of the business canvas is that really on the right-hand side, you have revenue, the front office activities, and on the left-hand side, you have the costs, which are all your back office activities. Usually in the space business, people think about, hey, I'm going to be selling launches. I'm going to be, I've got some, some technology that I've gotten out of a NASA facility, DOE, what have you. I've got my own technical expertise, and pretty much I'm going to be offering that to the customers. And that's sort of represented in the value proposition. Andy Aldrin will be talking about that later on. And a couple of things about the value proposition, which is where space startups usually focus on, and that's your value proposition. In order for it to be a strategic competency, needs to address three important points. One is the strong value to customers. Number two is the differentiation from competitors. And number 3 is that it's difficult to copy. Strong value to customers means that you really understand what customers want. And some of the just discussions we had this morning, I find that in the space startups, it's less about the technology and more about understanding what your customers want. Here in the business canvas, it doesn't really focus on the competition, but you could use this same framework to scope out, well, what do I know about my competition? And of course, difficult to copy means sort of what's the barrier to entry on that. So I'll, a few more things to say about the value proposition later on, but let me go through and, as you work with the business canvas, this is one that we did for the Silicon Valley Business Center. And, you can get a big canvas and kind of post sticky notes on it and do some brainstorming, and it can get to be fairly complicated. Michael Mealing from Starbridge said, we like to see our, the companies we're talking to having focused on the business canvas. And if you look at just the basic outline of the canvas, you're like, oh, sure, that's fairly easy to do. But as you really get into it, it can actually be a multi-dimensional problem. You can do a separate canvas. As I mentioned, you can do a canvas for your competitors. You can do a separate canvas for each segment of your customer pool, and you can also talk about what are the front of the office activities and the back of the office activities. You can also do the business canvas for the various stages of the selling process, awareness, evaluation, the decision-making process. Once the product is sold, how does it work? So what I thought I would do is really focus on, we had a earlier presentation, very nice presentation last week on Amazon Ground Station services. And so what I thought I would do is spend my time today to talk about AWS Ground Station and how AWS would fit in within the business canvas, for instance. So with AWS Ground Stations, you've got, perhaps the service you're providing, of course, is ground station communications. So it grew out of the AWS, Amazon Web Services, for rapid availability of data, and they thought, people are using our infrastructure to analyze satellite data. Perhaps we should also be building ground stations on top of that. So if we look at the customer segments portion of this, and just dive into it, with some depth, you could say, well, fundamentally, we've got government customers and commercial customers. Well, what about those government customers? Well, we have U.S. government and foreign customers. Those are completely, can be potentially completely different entities. And so as you think about, gee, on my customer segment, if I want to work with government customers, then what's required on that? What is actually the U.S. government? It could be different agencies, whether you're working with NASA or Earth observation groups. That can be its own segment, and you want to do a deep dive and say, within this canvas, how do I serve, for instance, the U.S. government customers? I could also say, gee, I'd also like to do business with China. Well, in the canvas, you'd say, well, how does that work? If I'm doing both business with the U.S. government and with China, maybe that's a problem. Maybe I want to decide between the two. Also note here is the commercial customers. I might ask, gee, am I working with Planet Labs, for instance, came out with, they had acquired assets from Google with Skybox. If I'm AWS, well, how would I actually work with, do I even want to work with Planet? What kind of services would I offer Planet? Spire, they have their own ground station segment. And so how does AWS work with Spire, for instance. On the customer segment side, here for space startups, you could say, well, am I focused on LEO? Am I focused on MEO? Am I focused on lunar activities? So the customer segment box is really an opportunity to do a deep dive as to who are your customers and how do they want to work with you. We heard that from HubSpot. So really understanding what we know about particular customers we want to reach out to. So in the customer relationships box, this is exactly how do we actually work with that customers? And here I might say that it's a combination of self-service all the way up to boutique handholding. So that if you look at an individual customer, you want to say, how am I actually going to work with them? What's the relationship that I have with that group? Is it they just come to my website and sign up for services, or do I have to get to know them and they require a little bit more handholding? And as was mentioned, as you go through the various stages of the sale process, from awareness to evaluation to purchase to delivery to even after sales, you'd say, how do the various elements of the business canvas work together? So in terms of channels, to build awareness, well, do we just have conferences? How do I get the word out on my company? Do we have Zoom meetings? Do we have Chime meetings? And even, you might even consider referrals from existing customers as part of your, channel development. Can you get referrals from customers saying, yeah, we're really happy with the service we got, and it grows into a new relationship of some sort. So with the ground station services model, in terms of revenue, you'd like to think about what are the different options that we have in terms of generating revenue from our product. Is it just straight sales? Is it just a simple transaction? Or is it something where we have additional services? For instance, on AWS, we've got charges associated with compute and storage. We'd have data transfer fees for getting data in and out of AWS. So within that right-hand side of the business canvas, you want to focus on understanding what my customers are. Do a deep dive on that. Walk in your customer's shoes. Understand what their pain points are. Understand how we're actually going to work with them, and then understand what's the mechanism by which we deliver our product to them. Now, on the left-hand side of the business canvas, I see this as more of just a back office activities. What are the things that we need? We're going to have marketing program, a sales program. Are we using HubSpot? Are we using some of the other CRM tools that are out there? Sometimes they get the question between what are customers and what are partners. And within this diagram, I like to think that cash is typically flowing from right to left. That customers are the people that pay us, and our partners are the people that we end up paying. So we have a revenue stream from small satellite operators. We're using HubSpot. HubSpot would actually be one of our partners on this. You'd like to break down all of the key activities that you're doing in the back. Again, that relates to that sales funnel, which goes from awareness to evaluation to making the decision to continued support and operations. Down on the bottom, we've got the cost structure. and your goal as a startup is to have revenue exceed your annual revenues exceed your annual costs. And if you think about it from a startup perspective, the costs of investment capital, the investment capital that you put in, your goal is, from a startup standpoint, is to say turn $100 million of investment into a revenue stream that's pretty much generating about, let's say, $100 million of revenue per year. If you assume a price to revenue, price to sales ratio of about 10, then that's what you might assume as a billion-dollar company on this. So the business canvas is something which can seem very simple on the surface, but you can actually read a lot into it. You can read a lot into it in terms of how you how you break down different customers, how you break down the sales process, how you support operations within that, what your competition is doing. And so when Michael Mealing says we like to have our entrepreneurs understand the business canvas, I think you want to do a deep dive on this process. Again, there's a lot that's been published on this topic. You can go to YouTube and dig up a wide variety of videos about the business canvas. But I feel that it's a kind of topic that if you study it, you can actually think a lot about how you should be running your business, and it's a helpful way to sort of cover all the bases. So in closing on this topic, I'd like to say that for the business canvas, it's break down your business model. What are the market segments? Spend a lot of time thinking about that. What's the value proposition that you offer your customers, as Steph and Ricky mentioned? And then how do you identify what are my strategic partners? Who are some of the people that I need, whether it's a HubSpot or the faculty at the university, are they my strategic partners? Or any number of other people. We're turning raw materials into finished goods, going from one side of the canvas to the other. The SWOT analysis is very helpful. You can do a SWOT analysis on each element of the business canvas. And I also mentioned a PEST analysis, which is looking at the political, economic, social, and technological issues that can affect both your customers and your partners, and throughout the canvas. I didn't really mention various business types, but for product innovation, this is mentioned in the business canvas book. You really focus on technology innovation, customer, are you really a service organization, or infrastructure management? Clearly, AWS is a combination of those, where they've got infrastructure management, they've got the infrastructure of AWS, and how do you support that? They've got customer management for how are they helping individual startups, and product innovation. How are they bringing new, let's say, AI tools, machine learning tools to the problems that their customers face? So in working your pitch, there's nothing like bringing a handful of customers that are dying for your product and your service to bear as part of your pitch. And so with that, I'd kind of like to close and just ask if there are any questions, Stefan.
If anyone has any questions, feel free to just turn on your mics and your camera, or put in the chat. We have a couple minutes here for questions. I think you wowed everyone, Sean.
Sean?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for the presentation on the canvas. My model is the customer doesn't even know what they have yet. NASA and the Russians forgot they can weld in space. They tried that about 50 years ago and promptly forgot all about it. So there's a company starting up a space hotel, and I watched their video recently, and I saw the assembly method, but it's all done by clicking things together. And I thought we can eliminate half the material that they're sending up there because we can just join them in space. But the concept of welding in space has not been, it has been forgotten. So my job now is to reintroduce that concept back to NASA and to the ESA. So it's even further back on the Canvas model.
I don't think so. I mean, that's what you're saying. It's like I've got welding in space, but what is that? What are the other value propositions that are there associated with welding? I mean, before you're welding in space, there are a number of things that you have to do beforehand in order to prepare for that process, right? So in that case, for welding in space, you'd say my customer is NASA and ESA. It's probably a subset of NASA and ESA on that. And yeah, we're working on welding, but you know, how does that process actually happen? What are some of the other things you have to do? Let's say for certification. Prior to that, how do I actually train? If I'm talking about astronauts, how do I actually do the training so that the astronauts could be proficient at that welding? Right. And
yeah, no. The sales pitch is astronauts can weld in space without being welders because the technique is automated. But I understand. Got your point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, but yeah, but even for that, you know, relatively straightforward example. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Sean. I have a question on the lean or the business model canvas. How do you go about quantifying relationships in between the fields?
What do you mean by quantifying? What do you mean by quantifying the relationships?
So either we have like a standard metric across all of them, could be sales, could be money moving from key partners to value proposition. That is, how do we break it down in order to see the machine working?
Well, I think the machine working is, you know, your sales funnel. And, you know, how do we, you know, the first thing you do is, you know, for my company, how do I build awareness about my company? That in itself is its own process. What is, you know, do I just go out and am I shaking hands and kissing babies, you know, to build that relationship? Or do I have a, you know, a marketing campaign? Am I written up in Space News? And then, you know, from that process, you go from the awareness to the actual engagement. And we, you know, heard some about that in the HubSpot coverage. So, and then, you know, still the same thing. How do we go about, you know, what are the channels that we use for engagement within customers? How do we deliver to them?
But would you go analytical? So your first approach is non-analytical, and then the second layer is analytical, correct? Numbers of page hits per industry, numbers of connections done, but you'd start with non-analytical and then move to analytical. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's clearly the sales cycle is a cycle, because once it's about customer acquisition and then customer retention, right? And once you have, you know, a sale, is that a one-time sale, or are you continually selling on that topic? If you look at the space tourism business, if you look at climbing Everest, for instance, how many times do you want to climb Everest? 1, 2? I mean, that's kind of all it's about, customer acquisition.
Yeah, and they build a funnel on that. You go to base camp, from base camp you move to type 2, from a type 3, right. So we can do the same thing with the product. Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, if it's a linear process, then, you know, maybe you don't have real customer you know, customer retention, but you might say, you know, are there various offerings that I can have for those customers, and to make it more of a cycle? How can they also, you know, help you sell that product down the road? So,
Exactly.
and I think on this, you can say, well, you know, how do I know? How do I define success on my customer relationships? How do I define success in delivering content to people? I'd like to know how many clicks I get, how many calls am I doing, how many deals am I closing from that?
Yeah. Okay. That's what I was going at. Is behind each box is which one are the analytical? Which one is the analytical view versus key partners? These names. What does that mean specifically in terms of numbers? Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, I
Thanks.
think sometimes people say, well, some of my key partners maybe actually be my customers too, and I think that can
Of
get
course.
things a little bit confusing. But you know, at a first pass, who's paying me, and then who am I paying?
Appreciate it.
We have time for one more quick question, Sean, from Simon. He was asking, what are the differences between business model canvas and lean canvas that we should take into account?
Well, I think I interpret the lean canvas as you're going towards your minimal viable product, and but I think the structure is fundamentally the same. You can actually build out the canvas and say, well, overall, this is where I would like to be over, a 10-year period. But to get it down to the minimal viable product from discussions with customers, what you're still going to have all of those relationships. You're still going to have to decide, well, what is the customer relationship I have on my minimal viable product? How am I delivering my minimal viable product to customers? And that you can get started on this process right away using lean. So as Steve Blank is often quoted, you've got to get out of the lab, and I think that's the space, for space comm and space entrepreneurs. It's not that I have a good idea, but you have to go engage customers, and that's the challenge. Go engaging customers through sales, asking a lot of questions. We talked about different sales processes. A couple have come to mind. One is Sandler, and you can find these things on Amazon. The Sandler process, which is a lot about asking questions. How to identify the pain, the budget, and the decision makers. There's strategic selling, which is Miller Heiman, and their focus on understanding what customers want. And then the challenger sales, which is really, I'm the expert on this topic. Let me, help you solve your problems. So
great. Thanks, Sean. Thanks so much. And we'll be making a copy of the slides available to the group as well. Thanks, John.
Yeah, sure, Stefan. I've got a more detailed set of slides that I didn't want to go through today, but I'll be happy to send those out to everybody, along with an Excel sheet on the business canvas.
That'd be wonderful. Thanks, appreciate it. We're one section late, but the good news is we have the time. So Andy, thanks for staying over your time allotment. Andy Aldrin's going to go through developing effective value propositions for space. Andy, do you have slides you're going to present?
I do. So how do we do this?
Great. So Jackson, if you can give Andy the ability to present. You are now the presenter now.
I'm getting a message that it needs accessibility privileges. Do you see my charts now?
No, not yet. And we're cool. This is the casual format. So if you want, Andy, you can send them to me. I can also present them.
Hang on. I think I know what I need to do here. I just need to give GoToMeeting access.
We now have control over your computer.
Okay, so now it's telling me restart.
Okay.
It wants more preferences. And it wants to restart one more time.
And Sean, there's a question for you that came up on the chat if you're still on. I think you are.
Sure, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. It says, any chance you can direct me to more information about including the customer in the pitch? Maybe an example somewhere from Eric Long.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you can just jump on the chat. All right, Andy, we can see your
Okay.
slides.
You can see my slides now. This is progress.
Perfect. Great. The floor is yours.
Now the next great question is, can I change them? Okay. Technology is a wonderful thing. You know, we can go to the moon, but we can't. Never mind. So the first thing I want to tell you all is, Sean is absolutely right with respect to lean canvas. It's very important to get out there. But one thing I want you all to do for just a second is stop and think through your value proposition, because honestly, it is one of the most important things that you're going to do for your business. But at the same time, don't overthink it. I mean, don't get wound around the axle, because the first value proposition you come up with, it's probably going to change. In fact, almost inevitably, every business starts out with one value proposition and ends up with something very different. I mean, look at SpaceX. SpaceX started out, they're going to build a small, cheap rocket that everybody could get. And that didn't work. He built a big, cheap rocket that everyone could get. But the point is, stop and think about what you're doing for just a second. And if there aren't, you know, you can get yourself wrapped around the axle overthinking things, but you should really take some time to think about the value proposition. The other thing I want to touch on, I think I actually showed this chart last year. So if anyone was here last year, you're going to see it again, because it resonates with a lot of what you've been hearing today, but it's important. So most of you out there are engineers and you're technologists, and we're all in love with our technology. But when you start looking at what investors really care about, there is the technology. And even if you got flying saucers, this thing is transient. As I said, whatever it is you think is the right idea probably isn't going to be the right idea once you get out and start talking to customers, and you'll adjust your value proposition. And whatever you do, your first idea is going to be a single idea. What's important is understanding the technology. The other thing that's important to investors isn't really so much technology, it's people. They want to know that all of you are committed to what you're doing, that you understand what you're doing, that you understand the technology. The people are important. They're a lot more important than the technology, and certainly more important than the product itself. But ultimately, the foundation of any good business and of any good business team, of any good product and company, is understanding the overall market ecosystem. And it's a complex system. And most of you who have been in the space business have a pretty good understanding of that, but you'd probably suck if you tried to go into the shoe business. And that's important, and it's important to investors, because you're going to end up moving around. The first customers that you pick may not be the right ones. And so you need to have a broad understanding of all of these things. And so this is the market landscape that we all live in. And this is what you need to understand before you really even get into understanding the value proposition. What is the market that you're into? What is the industry? Is it actually providing data to farmers if you're in remote sensing? Is it simply delivering stuff to space if you're in the launch industry? And what's the market in terms of size, growth, and profitability? The next thing to understand, and this is kind of, you know, Sean alluded to this when he talked about a pest analysis. You've got to understand the depth of your market. In a lot of market areas, geopolitics is important. Sean at Amazon Web Services is going to be kind of reluctant to get too involved in Chinese business, I suspect. The demographics are important in terms of of who you're selling to. Technology is important, and obviously finance, competitors, regulatory. You need to understand all of these things. And I urge you all to make sure that you've got a background in these things, because your investors are going to realize it, and they're going to pick it apart if you don't. And then finally, what is the winning value proposition? So I want to get to that and spend more time talking about that, because that's really what I'm here to it's really what I'm here to talk about, right? So what is an effective value proposition? Is it inventions or inventors? So you probably guessed the answer to this, that inventions and inventors aren't really what's important. And so it's not that. There's an interesting thing. The two guys that are here, over on the left is Thomas Edison. The guy on the right is Nikolai Tesla, who you know did not in fact invent the electric car. Tesla was probably the more brilliant inventor, probably the more brilliant technologist. But you know, Nikolai Tesla ended up his career getting kicked out of a hotel. It happened to be the Waldorf Astoria, because he was basically living with a bunch of pigeons in his room in the Waldorf Astoria. Now he happened to be in a very nice hotel, and he had made a lot of money selling patents to Westinghouse, but he was not successful at all as an entrepreneur. The interesting thing, if you get to Thomas Edison, wasn't the light bulb. He created General Electric, which ended up being the biggest company in the world for a time. It sort of had its ups and downs, but General Electric he created an organization, he created a brand, and that was an important element of his value proposition. So building a brand, building trust, building an organization is critical to your long-term value proposition. It's not just about your technology, your product, or your customer relations. It's about building an organization to last ultimately. So that's important, and don't lose track of that. So here's where I'm going to get in trouble, because everybody's talked about customers. And I'm not going to tell you that customers aren't important, but there's something more important. And I want to talk about a story. I'm going to get into it a little bit more in the next chart, talking about what can happen when you become too focused on your customer. And all you worry about is what your customer knows. So that story has to do with a launch company. It's called ULA. And it sort of, obviously it came from Boeing and Lockheed, and ULA got to know its customer very, very, very well. And it did exactly what its customer wanted. And it provided, from its customer's standpoint, good value and was satisfying the things that the customer wanted the most. In fact, in some ways it overachieved. But if you look into Clayton Christensen, I'm going to talk more about Christensen in a minute, your customer can actually drive you into a ditch. And so the thing that's more important to talk about isn't the customer. It's ultimately solutions, tasks. What you are doing is not providing something to a person or even an organization. And it's important. You need to understand what you're doing is actually providing a solution to perform a task. So I want to go back to something that Paul Chen talked about, because I think it illustrated an interesting point. Paul wants to talk about welding, and that's good. And welding is important, but by itself, welding is meaningless, right? By itself, technology is meaningless. Nobody cares if you built your rocket through additive manufacturing or putting together pieces of Play-Doh, as long as it works. Paul is doing something which provides a better solution to a task that needs to be performed, and he talked about it that way. He talked about it in terms of we need to put modules together in space, and welding those modules together is a better way of doing that job. Now, I'm not totally convinced it's a better way of doing the job. Nevertheless, that's what his value proposition needs to focus on, not necessarily who the customer is. Ultimately, you have to know who the customer is. You have to build a relationship with them. But the value proposition that you're delivering to them is ultimately about what works for them. Okay, so solutions are important. Solutions are absolutely critical. The other thing that's critical, and Sean alluded to this as well, is competition, sustainable superiority. Now, if you look at this picture, we know the guy in the box with the rocket is ahead. And he's probably going to be way ahead for a little while. But we also know that boxes make really, really, really lousy structures for rockets. So he's probably going to crash and burn pretty quickly. So the fact that he's ahead now doesn't really matter. He's got to work on sustainable superiority to his customers, performing a particular job. So that's another thing you've got to pay attention to. Now, if you look in the literature, you're going to find all kinds of stuff talking about value propositions, and you can get lengthy paragraph long descriptions. I like things that are simple because it can kind of focus you rather than thinking about all of the different words. So when I think about a value proposition, it's a credible promise of superior value. Credible is an important word. Credible means that it's believable. They believe your organization. They believe your technology. They believe your promises. And superior value is something you can perform a task better, cheaper, by some measure of value. And we'll get to that, some significant measure of value for your customer. So let's talk about this in the context of an industry. And so we all know space has lots of different segments to it, and it's getting increasingly complex. And if we wanted to talk about something like communications or remote sensing, it would get really, really complicated. Let's just talk about the simplest part of space, and that's launch. Launch is simple. What do? Fundamentally, what you're doing is you're getting stuff, payloads off of the Earth into space. That's it. I mean, ultimately, that's it. And if you look at what are the sources of value that you have in the launch industry, first one is performance. Now, we can talk about performance in lots of ways. The simplest way to describe it is mission success. Do you deliver a payload of a certain size to the place that you need it delivered, the orbit, whatever it is, the location you need it delivered, and do you do it on time? And do you do it in such a way that it doesn't rattle things apart? But that's it. If you check all of those boxes, you've satisfied them. Let's talk about price. Lower prices are always better. But ultimately, if you look at what matters in the space industry, you've got organizations and they establish budgets. And whatever is in that budget, you got to meet that budget. And if you don't meet the budget, you got a problem, and you'll see. But obviously, lower cost is better. And you're going to see different customers are going to trade mission success against budget and price at different levels. But ultimately, you've got to understand, and I think Sean alluded to this. We talked about it. Certainly, Stefan alluded to it. You got to understand what your customers' budgets are. How much can they spend, and at what point does it break, and at what point does it cease to matter if you're reducing prices? Then finally is service. I mean, in any industry, there are a whole lot of sources of value. You can talk about things like market access. You can talk about things like prestige. You can talk about all kinds of sources of value. But when you get to the launch industry, you're fundamentally talking about three things: performance, price, and service. And it's important as you analyze where you are, what industry you're in, you focus on the things that are important. What's not on that list? Technology is not on the list. The customer does not care if your rocket has electric motors. It doesn't care if you've got dilithium crystals. It doesn't care if you put it together with additive manufacturing or you put it together with staples, as long as it does these things, right? And so it's important. Now, don't get me wrong, I think there are times when technology can be important for brand, but it's fundamentally not what the launch customer who's got a task to deliver stuff from Earth to space needs. They don't need the technology, and it's important to understand that. Okay, so what does the customer ultimately need? This is where it gets important because they're different in the launch industry. And there's a great story that comes out of this that I'll get to in just a second. So the Department of Defense, throw the NRO in there with them. They care about first and foremost mission success. They must get there to the place that they need to be with precision. They must get there on time. And actually timeliness is a huge deal. And they care immensely about the service side of it. Are you giving them confidence? Now, one of the mistakes that ULA made in a sense was, in a way, they sort of overemphasized this, and it wasn't just about mission success. It was about, one of the things that we used to say is we turn colonels into generals, and that sounded great, and it was right, and we did. If you took over the launch services program at SMC, we made sure that your launches were successful. And if you've got successful launches, you're going to go from being a colonel there to a brigadier general in Colorado Springs at A3 or wherever it is. And that's great. And that was a great thing for ULA to do. But you'll see it ended up sort of driving them into a difficult corner. So the next customer, NASA, they're a little different. Obviously, mission success is hugely important for NASA. I mean, it is for these customers absolutely primary. But once you get to a certain point where they feel pretty good about mission success, that's good. That's good enough. Think about NASA and commercial resupply. NASA could tolerate a failure with commercial resupply. What they couldn't tolerate were the prices that ULA was charging, because it blew their budget out. What NASA wanted to do is they wanted to take a $3.5 billion a year budget that it took them to to have shuttles supporting the station, and they wanted to turn that into $1 billion. I mean, that was their goal. And that's vastly different from what the Air Force is trying to do. So it's important to understand the big, same US government, but all US government customers are not the same. Let's talk commercial for a second. So for commercial, it's price. Depending on the customer, they can be very tolerant of failure because they insure it away, right? So if you're Intelsat and you lose a launch, you haven't lost a whole lot of revenue because you've insured the value of the launch as well as your spacecraft. You haven't lost a revenue stream because probably you've got a fleet of 50 satellites up there, and probably what you sent up there is something that you can tolerate. You can tolerate 6 months without a satellite, you know, if you can get something else up there. But if you're a small constellation with, let's say, 4 satellites, you're going to be a lot more careful about it. You're going to be a lot more sensitive to mission success. So you need to understand what the job your customer is doing and how it's important. So let's talk about Clayton Christensen and the innovator's dilemma. For those of you who don't know, Clayton Christensen was a Harvard business professor, very much in the tradition of Schumpeter, talking about creative destruction. But Christensen had some really, really interesting observations. And one of them was that the customer can actually drive you into a position where you expose yourself to market disruption. And if you look at what happened between ULA and SpaceX, it is absolutely positively what Clayton Christensen describes in his Innovator's Dilemma. And there are several other books. They're all basically the same sort of themes, which are that there are some very powerful underlying forces in the market that drive incumbents to better and better performance and higher price, and the customers will continue to pay this. But what that does is it opens up the opportunity at the bottom of the market. And that is very much what's happened with SpaceX and ULA. Fortunately, he tells you some things about what you need to do to respond to this. And one of the things you end up needing to do to respond to it is probably creating a new organizational arrangement, certainly a new product line, rather than just trying to refine your processes and bring your costs down, which is what ULA is doing. I obviously don't have any insight into what their prices are vis-a-vis compared to SpaceX. I suspect they might be more expensive, but obviously, you know, given the last National Security Launch Awards, they're getting more competitive. So this is kind of working. One of the really interesting questions I have right now, we're actually doing a study on the emergence of the small launch industry, is this dynamic going to hold up in the small launch industry? And I'm not altogether sure it is, but it's a really, really interesting and important way to look at the future of our marketplace. So I want to conclude with a couple of thoughts, much broader in a sense. This is not the first time we've done this, and I think you all need to understand that. Most of you do, but you know, I've lived through at least 3 waves of space commercialization. Back in the 1980s, we were going to be launching the shuttle 50 times a year at a cost, at a marginal cost. I don't know what the price would be, at a marginal cost of $8 million a launch. Okay, so we missed that by what, like 992 million, I think. We didn't quite get to that number. And with the failure of the shuttle, obviously, a lot of things went away. But it's interesting if you look back historically at that time period from sort of the early 80s through the mid 80s, there were a lot of really interesting and important things that happened during that time period, sort of under the wave, if you will. One of the things that happened was we created a legislative foundation for the commercialization of space with the Commercial Space Launch Act. The other thing that happened is we did see the first wave of entrepreneurs, of several of them. The only ones that really survived were Orbital Sciences and in particular David Thompson. And if you look back at the history of Orbital Sciences and some of the things, it's remarkable how much risk they were willing to take on in their relationship with the US government. Great stories there. Okay, so nothing happened with that wave. Then there was the wave that wiped us out. And I suspect a lot of you lived through this in some way, shape, or form. But the late 90s, you know, we saw something like well over $10 billion of capital investment of real constellations that were orbited in space, real CapEx. After bankruptcy, well over $10 billion, probably $12, $15 billion, and it was sold in bankruptcy for 80 million. So one of the old stories about space is if you want to make a small fortune in space, start with a large one, but that's crazy. So here we are today. Here we are today. And we're surfing the wave, and I got to tell you that there are lots of things about this wave that look really good. But I will tell you that today, you know, when you've got several small launch companies who will remain nameless with valuations way over $1 billion, I wonder about turbulence. I wonder about turbulence. I wonder if some sectors in this industry are going to get wiped out. Here's one of the things that I kind of want to leave you with this point is we spent the first 2 waves basically surfing like bulldogs. We did. I mean, we would somehow or another get the wave, you know, all the way to shore, but it looked like hell sometimes. And today, you know, I think thanks to what you're doing here with this particular program, and there are lots of other educational programs that are out there, I think we're doing a much better job of training the right kind of surfers for the future of space. And I will, of course, leave you with a plug for my Center for Space Entrepreneurship. Check us out. Anyway, questions?
Andy, can you tell us a little bit more about your center, just real quick?
Sure, now that you mention it. The center is actually a partnership between the International Space University and Florida Tech. We're doing research programs right now for the FAA and a lot of other things, but the core of what we do is a summer program. It's actually a graduate certificate program that's 4 courses that are part of the Florida Tech curriculum. So they're much more like classic academic courses. And so there's a course in space policy and law, which I teach. Also, I bring in Henry Hertzfeld and a few international lawyers to talk about that. Henry is at the Space Policy Institute. There's commercial markets, which is something that I teach, and I bring in Peter Eckert, who's a former McKinsey consultant, to work on that one. Technology and systems, I have Angie Buckley, who teaches that class with, she's from aerospace, as well as Chris Welsh from the International Space University. And then last and certainly not least, we've got a course in space entrepreneurship that Greg Autry teaches, and many of you know Greg in the community. First year, we run the program out of the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex. The first year, we did the whole thing in 6 weeks. The second year, last year, we ended up going online. We had hoped to get to Kennedy Space Center for at least a couple of weeks. Weren't able to do that. This year, we're going to split it. Actually, we're going to do 8 weeks online and then 2 weeks at the visitor complex at the Kennedy Space Center. And we think that may be kind of the best of both, because what it allows us to do is, first thing is we can bring in students from all over the world. So for example, this last summer, we had 3 students from Africa, 4 students from Europe, a bunch of students from around the US. We actually had a student from Sri Lanka as well. The other thing is we feature very much guest speakers. And by doing it online, the first year at Kennedy Space Center, we had 17 people come in and talk to us, but you're never sure that we could get them to line up with exactly what the lectures were just because of their schedules. But now we're able to do that with a lot more precision. And so we'll bring in a lot of guest lectures, and then we've got Florida. So we'll be touring all the facilities. You can't go 2 weeks in Florida without a launch. The first year, we were fortunate. We actually had the night launch of the Falcon Heavy, which was pretty awesome. So yeah, that's kind of what the program is like. We have, this past year, we had a phenomenal group of students. They were writing papers that frankly are publishable quality, and we're going to try and get some of those in the New Space Journal. 4 different groups are out there starting businesses. We'll see. They've only been at it for months, if not just weeks, but it makes me happy to see people taking what we're learning and and taking it out to the marketplace. So super happy with the progress we're made. It's a young program, but yeah, check it out. There's the website, and if you're really interested, you can always give me a call or send me a note, and I'd be happy to talk with you about it. Is that enough, Stefan?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Thanks for sharing your passion, your excitement, your knowledge. We have time for one question. I still want to keep it under. If we keep it under a minute.
I have a question, Andrew. Sorry, because this is really like your place is really pretty amazing. You got my email already, so which industry or industries align with the development of space? Is it the automotive industry?
Yeah.
From the early 80s, or is it the cargo or recreational maritime industry, or is it a combination of both? Because I've been trying to draw the parallels between industry growth on Earth and then flip it 90 degrees to see how can we accelerate that. And suggestions.
Yeah, so if you asked me this question probably a year and a half ago, I'd have said, space is unique, timelines are longer, risks are higher, all of this other stuff. Since I've been engaging in these studies of industry emergence with scholars that have looked at lots of different industries, my eyes are kind of opening up. I mean, there are things about space that are very unique, but I would probably, and there's some serious reservations that I have about this comparison, but the more I look at early aviation, the more interesting parallels I see. The major differences, aviation always knew there was always a underlying function of we're going to go from here to somewhere else. We're going to take people, which isn't there yet in space for the most part. But I think as you saw, some of the dynamics of the startup companies, around the turn of the last century are very similar, and the formation of companies are very similar. So I would kind of look, that seems like the best thing to look at. We're not going to get to the numbers that you look at in automotive, where you're building tens of millions of cars. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at on that right now. But call me in a year and I may have a really different opinion.
Thanks. I just shared the picture with the group because I think that's where we are. We are riding the 100-feet waves in Nazaré in Portugal. I'll share the picture with you.
Great. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Gonzalo, for sharing that too. So we have 5 minutes left, and I wanted to be respectful of everyone's time. I was asked a question earlier on where we were in terms of the steps. So obviously, we're in the online skills workshop week. We're at day 2, pretty exciting. Next week is mentor week. At the end of next week, we're asking everyone to do their final 1-minute video. And that's going to be submitted on the Startup Includer platform. And then we'll announce the winner or the finalists for the competition by February 15th. And then the grand finale, which I strongly urge you all to attend, will be live streamed. So next couple of slides talk more about it. So on the next slide, again, just to repeat the judging criteria. So 4 major topics: market need, product strategy, execution, entrepreneurship, and presentation skills. If anyone has any questions, just drop me an email. But these are basically the categories that the finals judges will be reviewing whatever information you've given. Ideally, based on your 1-minute video. Again, if we're all together in the same room, it would have been a lot easier, but to get the best interpretation of what you're doing, you need to submit that 1-minute video, the final one, and then that will be used in conjunction with whatever else information you can populate Startup Includer with. The draft video, the question here, can be submitted anytime. Ideally, if you can do it before the mentor week starts, which is next week, next Monday, or at least before your session, and I'll go through the schedule here as well. So the mentor week, every company that signed up, because we only have 8 sessions, will get at least access to 1 2-hour window, and you'll get 15 minutes. Each session will have multiple mentors, so the great news is you're going to get multiple perspectives. Question came up, where do you post the video? It's in Startup Includer. It's one of the questions, and I'm actually working with the folks that are developing the platform to make it very intuitive. So when in where your company is submitted in Startup Includer, one of the questions will have, you can do a pre and a post video. So a pre or preliminary video, and then a finals video. And again, I'll make sure by tomorrow, the folks that are developing the platform told me that they're going to put that question in. And it's a really cool, it's a startup company in Estonia that I've been working with now for 3 years called Startup Includer. So again, getting back to the session, it's going to be driven by multiple experts. And the idea there is you give your 1-minute pitch live, okay? If you have one pre-recorded, I'm asking the experts to at least listen to all the ones that are pre-recorded for their session, but you'll give it live and you'll be heard and critiqued. And again, depending on the time, you'll be able to present it again if you're able to quickly adjust. And then you'll have the opportunity to resubmit your videos by the 12th. The next slide is kind of small print. Hopefully you can read it, and I'll make sure that everyone gets a copy of their schedule. Please do attend the session that you're assigned to. I had to go through some quasi-alphabetical order. It was challenging to figure this out. Some of the sessions that do have more than 8, I'm going to guarantee that you get your 15 minutes of access to the mentors. Feel free to attend all the sessions. The only thing is I ask, and you'll be able to get feedback and hear. So it's as if we're all in the same room. You'll be able to hear the feedback that the mentors are giving that particular company that's presenting, but please only do present at the time that you're scheduled for. If for any reason, when we do a quick roll call at the beginning of the session, your company's not present, another company might grab your slot. So please do attend. And again, if you have any major conflicts with schedule, I can do one more iteration of this calendar from the company's perspective. Please email me, ideally by tonight. And then the finals on the next slide. Essentially, we're going to go through and live stream the broadcast. All the participants, everyone's urged to attend and promote it. It's going to be on all different types of social media. We're going to pick the 5 finalists, and then each finalist will have a total of 10 minutes, ideally half and half, time for your presentation and judges' questions. We're going to announce the winner in real time, and then we're going to get recognition available for all the participants, judges, and everyone that's been part of this. So hopefully I've gone over a couple minutes over the time period, but hopefully if anyone has any questions, please ask me, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Anyone want to ask a question, or anybody have anything pressing before we end this webinar?
Yes. Hi, Stefan. I saw the list and I appreciate all your effort in planning and everything. I was just curious, have the mentors been assigned by availability? Because obviously you said you tried to do some kind of quasi alphabetical thing. So I don't think they've been actually matched to companies per se, have they? And then the follow-up question would be, obviously, people can ask you to replan things, and I, appreciate that. But are companies also allowed to basically switch slots? Is my other question.
Yes. So the mentors obviously were the hardest group to plan. Yeah, different time zones. Yes. So the mentors were given opportunity to pick a session. I tried again. I think I started alphabetically as well. And then company-wise, I started alphabetically. So if there's a hard schedule concern, let me know. I'm going to try my best to accommodate it. And also, and one thing to note is everyone that's volunteered to be a mentor on this list has offered to give and share advice. So I'm not saying everyone should bombard all the mentors because they're all volunteers, but if there's a respectful, professional way you can approach the folks, if you see a particular person there, feel free. I mean, the whole idea behind this workshop and the whole event is to promote entrepreneurship that in a very collaborative way. Does that answer your question, Bobby?
Yes, perfect. Thank you very much, Stefan.
Great. Well, anyone else? Any questions? Well, thank you all for your time today and participating. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow, and we will get the recording of this session out to you by evening time, East Coast time. Have a great rest of the day, rest of the evening, rest of the early morning, depending on where you're joining. Thank you all.